So I hope you have your air on every place you go.
Yeah, I got a full day too. And I apologize in advance. I don't know if my staff told you I got a hard out at 9:30.
Yes, they did. And I
Okay.
was waiting on Reverend Anthony to join us, but we might just go ahead on and start without him since you have to leave early.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to begin as we are waiting on Reverend Anthony to join us. I'm sure he will be joining us soon. And good morning to everyone. For those that do not know, I am your Detroit City Council President, Brenda Jones. Some know me as the Citizen's Voice. I want to thank you for joining us this morning for coffee, tea. I happen to have water this morning. Whatever your favorite drink is in the morning, thank you for joining us with that drink and conversation. Also, we are live on Facebook at facebook.com/CP Brenda Jones. For those of you who would like to watch us, and thank you so much for joining us this morning, Chief Craig. I think we have been joined by none other than the president of the NAACP, Reverend Wendell Anthony. This week, like many of you, I've experienced a range. When I say a range, I mean a range of emotions. I've been deeply saddened when I think about the 9 long minutes that George Floyd endured trying to breathe. I can't even begin to imagine. I've been angry every time I think about another unarmed man, Black man, being killed by unlawful enforcement. And that's right, I said unlawful, because there was nothing lawful about those officers' actions, nothing. I felt a sense of pride as I watched and participated in peaceful marches that were being done to promote police reform. I felt deep I felt deep emotions and deep feelings and very happy for the outstanding professional work of our Detroit Police Department in handling situations that could have very well been very different outcomes. The conduct of the Detroit Police Department reflected its leadership from our own Chief James Craig.
Thank you.
Also at the forefront of ensuring the killing of George Floyd will have meaning is Reverend Wendell Anthony. Reverend Anthony wrote in the paper this past weekend, "Keep the focus where it belongs, on the death of another Black man. We must find a better way." That's right. We must recognize the wrong and the change. Policing policies that it never happens again. This must never happen again. And so again, I am pleased to have joined me this morning two outstanding gentlemen, none other than Chief James Craig and the president of the NAACP Detroit branch, Reverend Wendell Anthony. And so I want to start off with you, Reverend Anthony, and ask you just why do you think George Floyd's murder has sparked so much outrage and protest in comparison to other police murders of unarmed Black men and women, such as Breonna Taylor and Aubrey. Why do you think this death has sparked so much? You're on mute. You're mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Good morning.
Okay, we could not hear you. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
I thought I had unmuted. Folks don't usually accuse me of not being heard. But at any rate, let me say good morning to you and to the chief. And to the folk that are watching and listening. Let me say, Council President, I think it's a confluence of events. This is bigger than George Floyd, although that might have been the spark that ignited the fire that you see illustratively through marching and protesting around the country. But I think it's a combination of ills. It's a combination of Breonna Taylor. It's a combination of Ahmaud Arbery, a combination of Trayvon Martin, of Eric Garner, combination of Walter Scott, Philando Castile. It's a combination of the lack of access to healthcare. It's a combination of seeing over the years police officers, rogue police officers being charged and getting off and going back home. And you see it right before your eyes, but somehow it never happens that the issue of justice is being served. And I think that things reach a boiling point. And so when you put all that together within a pandemic, within an experience where Black people are dying at disproportionate numbers in cities around this country, you put that in a situation where you don't have access to economic development as other folk have. You put that in a situation where African Americans are unemployed now because of the pandemic, double the number of what they should be. They're higher than any population in the country. You put all those factors together, and then you have an explosion. And it's bigger, as I said, than George Floyd. It might have started off as being around that issue, but now it's taken on a characteristic that is beyond all of this. It's one now talking about reform all over the country, reform in police departments, reform in healthcare, reform in the halls of justice, reform in our political. It's taken on all kinds of forms in terms of what we need to do. So when you look at that, this is the spark, but it's burning in a number of ways. And the question will be, when Dr. King asked the question in his last book, and Chaos or Community, where do we go from here? The real question is, where do we go from here? Are we going to go back 50 years and do nothing? Are we going to maintain the status quo? Are we going to go forward and bring about some significant change and reformation? It's not about talking, it's about walking and structuring and redoing and repurposing. We have the moment here. The question is, will we seize the moment and do something with it?
Thank you for that. And we definitely have the moment. And as you said, we can protest and have peaceful protests, but what are we going to do after we protest? Chief Craig, would you say the difference between the protests here in the city of Detroit and the violence we've seen in other cities is due to our Detroit Police Department having such a strong relationship with the community?
Thank you, President Jones. Again, I just want to start, and let me apologize again for having to depart promptly at 9:30, but a great question, and I've certainly done a lot of reflection. As you know, lion's share of my career was in the city of Los Angeles. I was on the front seat of the 1992 LA riots. I saw the good that came out of it, but certainly recognizing the bad. And while I was a young boy, when the '67 riots took place here in Detroit, there's some consistent themes. And I think what's most troubling, these things die off. We come up with a lot of ideas in a reactive way. And I want to put emphasis on reaction. We react, everybody wants to get on board. Police officers need enhanced implicit bias training, sensitivity training, and those are all good. They need to enhance their tactical response to conflicts. These are the things that continue to be bantered in the aftermath. And what we lose sight of, these are the things that we were supposed to do when, after the riots in these other cities, after consent judgments. Some of these cities have been grappling with federal oversight for 13 years. When I got appointed here, Detroit was under by that time, 10 years. And so you got to ask yourself the obvious question, what's wrong? And I'm working on something now that I will be revealing that I think finally, not just here, but across this country, we'll get it right. But I will tell you, when I look at the city of Detroit, there are a couple of things that make us stand out. I've been asked across this country lately, because there's this expectation that as the conflicts begin to erupt in major cities, people strongly believe Detroit was going to be leading in terms of the type of violence and destruction. And it didn't happen. Now, I'm not taking a victory lap. I'm certainly not patting myself on the back, but what I will say is that first and foremost, I applaud this community. And you can't have the kind of response that we saw unless you have a trust-based relationship in the community. We didn't wait for the tragic murder of Floyd. We didn't wait for the pandemic to start trying to figure out how do we address a community that's in pain. This has been a core mission of this police department to build meaningful relationships, and those relationships are paid off. I don't know, but how many other cities have had community members, activists that have not always agreed with this department on the ground with the protesters, activists behind the scenes that are working with other segments of our community who were angry, not angry at the Detroit Police Department, angry because outsiders converged on our city. It wasn't that Detroiters from the neighborhoods didn't want to be here. Many knew that if some came, there might have been intense conflict. And so there was a lot of leadership, quiet leadership going on behind the scenes. But do know, there was one message in unison saying, we don't want you here. We're not experiencing the problems. And so that was a powerful statement. And then let me just talk briefly about the Detroit Police Department. I don't care what police department is across America. We've done a lot of good work in our community and inside the organization. Detroit police, like no other, you're gonna have bad actors. I can't speak to the Minneapolis Police Department because I've heard some of the news reports that I guess they've had a history of not so good relationships. And so police department's gonna have bad actors. The key is what do you do and how do you address the bad actors? Is there a transparent way of dealing with it? Is it done quickly? Are you giving the community reassurance that you are taking this seriously? As much as I applaud the work of our police department over the past 5-6 days, I've gotten the reports, allegations of bad acting, individual confrontations, where it's alleged that our officers may have overstepped their authority in how they treated some of the protesters. We are actively investigating that. The key is accountability. And so I just want to close on that note because I think it's important to say it. So proud of the leadership team, the men and women, and having been on the ground, you can only imagine the barrage of insults that were hurled at the officers. The fact that the officers were attacked by weapons, boulders, railroad ties, small fireworks, you name it. And then destruction of property. It has an impact on our city. This is not what Detroit wanted. And while we now know that the triggers had to do with a small minority of outside agitators, call them what you want, overwhelmingly, Detroit wants folk to go home. And so we can get on with the business at hand. And so I'll close on that note at the appropriate time. I know I'm running about 10 minutes. I'll take any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Chief, and I know you do have to leave, and I know Reverend Anthony is going to want to comment, but just quickly, Chief, let me just ask you one question, because although I know that the police department did an outstanding job, there was some complaints from citizens saying that the police used military level equipment during the protest. In your opinion, what were the benefits of using this equipment?
Well, let's be clear. We can call it military equipment. Every police department has special response teams, or SWAT as it's called. We potentially could have had our city on fire. We potentially could have seen looting, potentially significant number of people injured. So priority one was not only keeping our officers safe, but keeping our protesters, the peaceful protesters who just wanted their voices heard. And we embraced that from day one. But we cannot and should not stand idly by and let the few do what we saw in other cities. What did we see in Philadelphia? What did we see in Chicago? What did we see in my old home of Los Angeles? Now, I'm not gloating. And what I'm saying, there's got to be a certain response, a very swift response by officers who are well trained. Now, again, as you pointed out, are we going to have bad actors? Have we had bad actors in the police department? It makes it tough for all of us? Absolutely. And we're promptly investigating that. And some of them that are very public, it is my goal and commitment that we will reveal the outcome, because there's some that I'm troubled by. But the vast majority of our officers did it right. And yes, we use gas in response to violent attacks on our police officers. We would have preferred one if we didn't have to make one arrest. We would have preferred that we would have never had to deploy gas throughout the last 5 days. But in the end, when I look at the outcome, and I know other cities were doing it too, but there are things that the other cities may have been lacking. Maybe it would have been the response from the neighborhoods. I'm getting calls daily, and President Jones from some of your colleagues who applauded how we responded despite using that force, which we say was necessary to overcome the violent attacks. I got to tell you, we were right there on the edge, and I, by design, will look at what's happening in other cities. There are consistent themes of this coordinated attack on cities across America. And some of the tactics we saw in other cities were very present here in Detroit. We had intelligence from our community that was extremely beneficial throughout this ordeal.
Okay, thank you for that response, Chief. Right before we go to Reverend Anthony, and I know he has something to say, if you have a question that you want to ask the Chief, because he's gonna have to leave at 9:30, please press *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand. If you press *9 on your phone, that will raise your hand. I do see one hand raised, and that is the last 3 digits of your phone number is 410. Don't forget what you have to say, Reverend Anthony. Note it down for 1 second. 410.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, good morning, Madam Council President and Chief Craig. This is Commissioner Brown.
How you doing?
I just wanted to echo the Chief's sentiments with the things that went on and commend the department for the handling of everything that went on. Although we know some of the things didn't go as designed and may have gotten a little worse, a little heavy-handed, but I think the job that the department did was an outstanding job. And what we discovered yesterday, that the numbers of the arrests that were made outweighed the numbers of the citizens of the city of Detroit. So I think it might have been a number about maybe 25% of the arrests may have been city residents, but the other numbers that were there were just all from outsiders. And I think the chief is correct with the intel and the things that was going on across the nation with some hidden agenda to try to destroy black cities and capitalize on this moment. But I think the chief and the men and women of the Detroit Police Department did an outstanding job. And I think we should be careful with these military weapon grade jargon or semantics, because tear gas is just tear gas. It's no different than what anyone else is using. And I think a lot of the things that the chief was saying is that the departments across America are just equipped with these tools to use to mitigate crowd control across the country. They've been in effect and been used before. But I think they did a wonderful job with mitigating and curtailing a lot of the violence and destruction that could have happened here in the city of Detroit. And I yield that time.
You did. Thank you so much for that, Police Commissioner Brown. Please stay tuned, because I know we're going to have another police commissioner on as well. So please stay tuned. Do not hang up, because we'd like to have you involved as well. So thank you for that. I see one more caller, 292, the last 3 digits of your number, 292. You are unmuted.
Good morning, everybody. This question is directed to Chief Craig. I just want to say that since you've been here, it seems like you've been doing a good job. I've seen you before, and I told you this. It seems like you handle your business where you keep a calm over the city. Like a couple things on TV where officers were disciplined or arrested or fired. That's what we need. If you jump on it right away, if something happens, then we're good. You know, so you keep the protesters and the violence down. And what I would like to add, it's bigger than just the death of a black man. What about when officers plant dope on people or write up a bad report and somebody get 25 years, somebody get 5 years? That's also a problem. So you might not be dying, but you're dying slow in jail. How will you address that?
And what a great question. And certainly I appreciate your confidence in the work that we're doing. As you may know, it was this police department, in response to one arrest by a narcotics officer for basically fabricating evidence and taking a bribe. He was arrested by the FBI. And it was this department, this chief, that felt very strongly that this was not his first time. This was not his first time. But beyond him, I also felt, based on other investigations that have been conducted, that there was a pattern, I believed, and a practice that needed to be stopped for years. And I mean, I can ask community, I've talked to police officers, and they will acknowledge for years there's been talk, both quiet and loud, that the narcotics unit was dirty. And the internal folks that worked there, who may have known and who were not involved, never came forward. So it was this department that decided that we would investigate, raid our own narcotics unit, and be very transparent about it. I've been working very closely with U.S. Attorney, Wayne County Prosecutor, to not only address those who may have been wrongly convicted and I'm very excited of the progress we are making. And so I'm going to be very shortly giving an update to the community where we are. We have finally named the work that we're doing, because everybody wants to call a task force something, but it's so appropriate when you look at the misconduct that was alleged to be occurring in narcotics. Operation Clean Sweep. And the reason why it was important to call it Clean Sweep, because it's one thing to put a Band-Aid on it. You know, FBI arrests one member when we have determined that there may be others involved. It is my goal and commitment that when we're done with this very lengthy probe, that this will not resurrect. You can't put a Band-Aid on something that needs sutures. And that's what has been done in years past. So I think finally, believe me, to call on 292, very important to me. I'll close on this piece because I think it's also important that I was the first police chief in America that came out on the untimely, the tragic death of Mr. Floyd and called it what it was. It was murder. And we know as police departments, we can go in based on probable cause, especially if there's evidence to suggest that a crime was committed, that we can arrest. Now, it's not my responsibility, and nor do I have the authority to charge someone, but I do have the authority to do investigations. And once that investigation is completed, it goes then to the prosecutor for charging decisions or no charges. But those officers should have been arrested. Clearly, anybody looking at the video, there was enough probable cause to believe that that officer committed murder. And I stand by that, and I will continue to stand by that. So with that, I just thank everybody for giving me time.
Can I add one more thing, Chief Craig?
Sure.
Before you go? The Disney movie, Attitude Reflect Leadership. Now, for years and years, police and community have been saying, hey, snitch on the drug dealer, snitch on the robbery, snitch on violence, all this. But nobody never say inside the camp of the police, snitch on your partner if he's planting drugs on somebody. If we all in this together, we all got to tell on each other when somebody's doing the wrong thing. So if the police are stepping up and making sure their partner or whoever in the department is accountable for the action they do, that's going to give us in the neighborhood to say, you know what, I can tell on this guy next to me because the chief and everybody else is trying to get the neighborhood together. I feel like that should be pushed along with everybody.
You know what? I appreciate that comment because that's a national cultural police thing, but it's a way to even eradicate that. And the one thing I can tell you, I have over the 7 years almost now that I've been here, I am starting to see finally a shift. That is probably one of the biggest obstacles that many police leaders deal with in police departments that are steeped in culture. You have to break the culture, and you have to, hold even those officers who may be complicit. The perfect case, the murderer of Floyd, those officers who stood by as cowards, they did nothing. They allowed it to happen. The people I applaud in the Floyd incident are the onlookers, are the community members that made a gallant effort to try to stop it, but of course, they couldn't. And so that's cultural, and we're working extremely hard to make that shift. And I can tell you, we're moving in that direction very aggressively. But again, I have to close out, but I just want to thank all of you, President Jones, Reverend Anthony, I appreciate your leadership on many of these issues. And certainly I'll be talking to you because I'm working on something that I think is going to not just affect Detroit, but the nation.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much for joining us, Chief
Thank you.
Craig. We look forward to you joining us again. I know you have to leave for another meeting, so I just appreciate you making time in your very busy schedule for us. So again, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
All
Bye
right,
now.
have a blessed day. Keep that
Likewise.
mask on when you're out there, Chief.
Yeah, I take it off. As long as the reporter's got a mask on, I'll take it off only if I'm interviewed. Ordinarily, I got my mask on.
I know they try to tell me you can't get it again, but I don't listen to them. I'm
I
keeping
don't
my
know about
mask
that.
on as well. Yeah,
I'm
me
not
too.
convinced.
Me either, Chief. Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
again. Have a good weekend. I'm sure we'll talk before the weekend is over. Have a great one.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great one
you.
too. Bye now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've also been joined by another police commissioner, Yvette Griffie. Good morning to you, Miss Griffie.
Good morning, Council President.
Thank you. Before we go to you, I know Reverend Anthony has a lot of comments. I don't even have to ask him a question because I know he has comments that he wants to make. So I'm going to jump right back to you. Thank you for your patience, Reverend Anthony.
No, I'm good, Council President, and good morning again, and Commissioner Griffie, who just joined us. Let me just say that I think that it is important for the acknowledgement to come from the chief in terms of some of the faux pas, some of the flaws that we have in the system, as well as some of the realities in terms of where we're going. Let me just say this again. I want to repeat that the death of George Floyd sparked and opened up a wound that's much deeper than just his death. And we see that now visited in police departments and in every institution of American life. There's racism, there's institutionalized barriers. There are things that we need to do and should have done years and years and years ago. We have not done. I mean, in 1967, we had the Kerner Report. The Kerner Report by the Kerner Commission laid out how police departments should work around this country. It told us that we're moving in the direction of two different societies, one poor and Black, one wealthier and white. And within that, you have policing. And it laid out a blueprint of how police officers should do community policing, how they should diversify their departments, how they should have independent review boards, how they should demilitarize the forces, how they should do A through Z. Then in 2015, in the state of Minnesota and in the city of Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed, there was a report by the Department of Justice. They came in and they told the police department, this is what you need to do in order to get rid of rogue police officers. These are the steps you need to take in order to diversify your department. They did not do it. In 2016, the same city, they had a new reform called the Sanctity of Life report, which dictated that police officers who were in situations of conflict should avoid excessive force. And that if other police officers who were with them saw that, they had an obligation and must intervene and stop it. In other words, the police officers who saw Derek Chauvin choking the life out of George Floyd were supposed to intervene and stop. They did not. They participated in it. They held him down on his back. He could not breathe. They ignored it. And then in 2015, you had the 21st Century Task Force on Police Community and Policing, issued by President Barack Obama. It laid out again how police departments were to function. It laid out 6 pillars, Council President, in terms of what we needed to do to address these problems. It talked about social communicating. It talked about diversification of departments. It talked about community policing. It talked about all the things that we're talking about again. But police departments around the country have not dealt with it. They have not adopted it. I don't even think they've read it. I don't think they know about the Kerner Commission report. I don't think they've looked at the report that's in these things that document what we should be doing. George Floyd, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, so many others did not have to die. If they had been paying attention to what has already been articulated, we would not be here. And what we're seeing today is the result of inaction, the result of a lackadaisical approach to police and community relations and to policing. And what you also are seeing is a divergence of 2 distinct traditions in protest. One tradition grows out of the Dr. King, John Lewis tradition. Another tradition is growing out of a contemporary, well, that was back in the day, we can do it in a different way tradition. And they're bumping heads. One grows up a nonviolent, let's study this and let's do it appropriately. Let's deal with policy. Another one comes in, we just gonna do this. Let's get this done. And come hell that may. What we need to do is to bring a bridge between the two traditions. Young people need the elders of the movement, and the elders of the movement need the young people in the movement. And so it should not be either or, it's both and. So Council President, we have issues, but I am heartened by the fact that there are departments across the country that are now taking some steps to deal with this. I like what the governor of the state has done. It's not going far enough, but she's calling for some statewide standards in terms of how police departments should function. Statewide standards in terms of being accountable, dealing with the mental evaluations that departments must have. For many of them, they think this is a war zone. They're at war with us. Hell, you ain't at war with us. You're supposed to be protecting and serving us. And on the question that my brother, the last question that talked about, I agree with him. So often police talk about y'all should snitch. It's not good to be snitched. Well, dog, you should snitch too. You should not allow bad apples to be in your department, which make it bad for everybody else. So let me just pause there, Brenda, Council President. And I'm just saying that I'm hardened because I see some significant change, but change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes in on the process of consistent struggle. That's what Dr. King told us years ago.
Thank you so much for that, Reverend Anthony. You are so correct. I want to just switch over to Commissioner Griffie for a minute, and thank you for joining us. On yesterday at the Board of Police Commissioners meeting, you sponsored a proposed procedural change to address certain uses of force. What is the change you proposed, and why did you propose that change?
You know, my colleagues on the Board of Police Commissioners echo many of the thoughts that have been brought on this session today. And we stand in solidarity with George Floyd and all the other victims of police brutality across the nation, unfortunately. When this happened, I dug deep into paperwork. I'm looking at policy right now, been at my desk for over a week, combing through policies to try to make sure that Detroit doesn't become the next place that this happens. And I have the privilege and the honor of serving my community to make sure that doesn't happen. I have a vote, which matters. And so I began to do some research, and I said, to make sure that our policies were in line with best practices that civil rights organizations like the NAACP and other organizations have put in place to prevent these from happening. And so there were three critical pieces of policy that I wanted to make sure that my colleagues and I adopted in our use of force directive, which are best practices that are now nationally being discussed. The first is that I want to mandate and require de-escalation practices before use of force can be utilized in our department. I want to require that officers who witness excessive force intervene and have a duty to report, which means that just like what happened with George Floyd, there were 4 officers there and no one stepped in. Under this policy, it would require officers to stop to try to intervene in what's happening or fear discipline themselves. And then finally, and this is not all, this is just the first tranche of change that we're trying to make rather quickly here. I think that we need more comprehensive reporting. So today in our policy, we require you to report if you use force. Well, that's too late. I want to know every time an officer threatens to use force, because I think that's a leading indicator, and we can understand if it's justifiable, then there's no reason you would not want to report that. If you are threatening the use of a weapon, I want to know. Because I think that those are the little small things that crack at the community's confidence in their police officers when you threaten force and it's not justified. And so I think we can do much more than this. These are 3 things that I want to start. And then I'm happy to report that yesterday during the meeting when I made the motion to include these items in our use of force policy, it was agreed upon unanimously, which doesn't happen often on that board. I also have, if you you'll indulge me, President Jones, some other things that I want to see happen. I think many of them Reverend Anthony discussed, but I think we need a coalition across the city to really start making some of these things happen.
Okay, we also have Commissioner Brown on the line, and he's on 410. I'm going to unmute him to see if he has any comments that he wants to make behind that. Commissioner Brown?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. I agree with my colleague. And before all of this happened, we were on the step, and that was the issue, a lot of the issues we had with the promotions. There was a lot of issues concerning the behavior of some of the officers during the promotional process, and we called it into question. And I think a lot of these things have to be looked at. And you know, when Commissioner Griffie talked about addressing our use of force policy, it needs to be looked at. It needs to be overhauled, because I don't think we do enough de-escalation training. That we need to work on that more than just policing. But we must understand this, that we still have our officers in a tough situation and a tough job, that they're given the task of the dual role of being the community social worker, and at the same time have to provide to protect and serve us. But we have to make sure that we continue to give them all the skills necessary for them to do their jobs and to do it safely and to serve the citizens of the city of Detroit.
I keep muting myself so I wouldn't give the background noise while you all are talking. Thank you so much for that. And it's bad when you mute yourself and you're talking to yourself and you think you're talking to people. That's really a bad feeling, but I am unmuted now. Thank you both for the work that you both do as commissioners. And
Jones, I just have one more. I just want to add, and I'm glad my colleague, Commissioner Brown, is on, because I think he agrees with these sentiments. We also have a lot to do, and I think Reverend Anthony mentioned it, around increasing the number of African American, Black and Brown officers and Detroit residents that are on the force today. Right now, about 55% of our officers are African American, and only about 23% of them live in Detroit. When we talk about opportunities for people to really understand and be amongst the people that in their own community that are policing, that's a huge opportunity for us to diversify the force. One other issue that I don't think residents really know and really understand, and it really impacts them, is how hard it is to recruit and keep officers when we do get them in. And I think there's a lot to be done on a state level, because today, DPD serves as a training ground for many of the suburban police districts. So you come to Detroit, you get A+ crime training, which is, you know, one of the best training modules across the country, and you get great experience because it's Detroit. But then Ferndale, Royal Oak, Troy, they come and get them, and exactly, Wayne State, and they pay them much more than we do. And so, and right now, when I first got on the commission, it was the first thing I rose my hand. I'm from the private sector. In the private sector, we would put some incentive or some rules around that so it wouldn't happen. And I said, well, why can't we, if these districts are going to get our officers, they should reimburse us for their training at the very least. And that requires a state law. And so these are some of the things that I, you know, even though I don't have, and my colleague, Commissioner Brown, I think agrees with me, we don't have necessarily the control. We really need to partner with people, with the city council, with our state legislature, with the NAACP, to force policies that are going to help us to resolve these issues. It's not just one thing. There's a multi-pronged approach, and I want to work collaboratively across the community to start pushing some of this stuff to happen.
Council President, if I can just say something on that point, I agree with the commissioner and that thrust. I just want people to recognize and remember, we fought for residency way back in the day. When Coleman Young came in office, it was largely because of stress. That's an acronym for a group, an undercover unit that was called Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets. They were basically killing Black people. they were planting weapons on Black folk and then saying that they had weapons and they were defending themselves. Well, Coleman wrote that issue into office, becoming Detroit's first African-American mayor. One of the things we talked about then was residency. We had residency, which meant that police officers needed to live in the community in which they served, because otherwise they would be viewed as an occupying army. And so we had it. It was the state legislature that took that away from us, that denied it. That has to be changed by law. The Kerner Commission report said residency was essential. The Obama's 21st century report on police in the community said residency was essential. So until we can change the state legislature, and that's where voting comes in, y'all, the next step is that if you tear up something, tear yourself to the polls and elect legislative bodies and governors that are in sympathy and in sync with what we need to happen. As long as we have this legislative body up there that we got now, it's not going to happen. And in addition to that, the unions, police unions, have been aiding and abetting this madness, this criminal activity. They're the ones who push for non-residency. They're the ones that protect these rogue officers. I believe in unions and I support unions, but unions need to get on the right side of history and do the right things in terms of justice. And until we get some Black folk in unions and also in the union leadership that understand that, we're going to have a multiplicity of problems. So when I agree, but there are some steps that have to be taken in terms of the voting electoral process that really is going to make some significant change.
Thank you for that, Reverend Anthony. I have to comment on that myself, because one of the things that I've seen happening also to the two commissioners was, and I was going to several graduations, and that was the prior to Chief Craig coming in, as well as while Chief Craig is here. And it's because I've not been able to go to as many graduations as I'd like to go to. My chief of staff has been there, Stephen Grady, at most of the graduations, and I have him tell me how many Detroit residents we have that are amongst the graduation. I asked him also how many African Americans, how many women, how many males. I asked all of those questions because that's something that has been a concern to me, as well as having the officers who come into the Detroit Police Department get trained and then leave almost after they've gotten trained to go to another police department. It's like the police departments that they go to talk to them ahead of time and say, go and get the training from Detroit Police Department because they give the best training, and then we'll hire you at the rate that we're gonna hire you at. And that was something that I worked with a legislator, Senator Santana, on trying to get that changed, because that law was something that was disturbing me tremendously. You're spending taxpayers' dollars getting trained here in the city of Detroit, and then you go to another police department almost soon as you get trained. That is like ridiculous. It just drives me crazy every time I hear that happening. And the other thing too is, I agree with residency. I agree that, not only does it help because you're able to relate, but it also helps our children as they're growing up, because what they're seeing in their community are police officers and firefighters, and they become mentors to these children. So also, if you know that a police officer lived down the street from you and in the neighborhood, you're less likely to commit a crime in that neighborhood. That's something that has been shown. That's something that I've seen. That's something that I have been hollering about for I don't know how long. It's something that bothers me. And then the other thing someone asked me about just the other day, I was on a call that was supposed to be with Black leaders, but it wasn't all Black leaders. But I was asked about whether or not the taxpayers are actually paying for the lawsuits when police are actually using heavy force or killing someone. And so I try to explain to them what actually happens in the indemnification process with Detroit City Council. And what actually happens is that a law department gets it, the police department and overlooks it, and then we see whether or not we're going to indemnify the officers. And if there is normally a criminal charge, definitely that officer is not indemnified. And if we see something that we feel the officer did that had actually nothing to do with his job, we have a closed session. We do not indemnify those officers. And then when there is we are not representing them, the city of Detroit is not representing them. Of course, anyone has the right to file a lawsuit against anybody, but normally that lawsuit is filed against the officer and not against the city of Detroit. However, we have had times where we have had lawsuits filed against the city of Detroit when situations like that occurs, but we're able to fight them easier if the officer was not indemnified. And so I think that we have to look at a lot of things. We have to look at federal laws being changed so that these officers that are using heavy brutality and doing things that they should not be doing against African Americans or any citizen, the laws should be changed. And no one should have to guess, how should we charge this officer? We should know up front how that officer is being charged. When you kill someone, you know what degree of murder you're gonna get normally. And so it should be no different because they are a police officer. Yes, we have bad actors in everything. We have bad actors that are police officers. We have bad actors, Reverend Anthony, that are part of our clergy. We have bad actors that have been city council members. We have bad actors that are teachers, that are doctors. We have bad actors in everything. And so we have to realize that there's bad actors in every field there is. And those actors needs to be held accountable for that action that they are giving out. And so until we do that, and until we change laws, and laws will change when you go out and exercise that right to vote, and you have the right people there representing you that are ready to change those laws. Sometimes we might as well just sit down, shut up and say nothing, because we are just as much as responsible for what is going on. Reverend Anthony, I know you were getting ready to say something.
No, I'm with you, Council President. We got bad actors everywhere, and so we need to deal with them and to expose them. And I think that if we begin to look within our own institution, our own area that can assist and that can help, I do just want to acknowledge that we got work to do. And this is not the ending. This is just but the beginning. Really, it's a continuation. It's a continuation, and somehow we got to take all of this mobilization and make it count. When Dr. King and all of those folk that marched back in the day, when they did what they did, they had an end game. When he got through marching, we had a civil rights bill. We had a voting rights bill. We had a fair housing bill. Things changed all over the country. With all this momentum, with all this activity in cities and states all across the nation, even now across the world, something is going to happen. And I know it has happening, Council President. I just want to share with you, I'm not going to read it all, but I have to just mention this. I got a text this morning as we were doing this piece, and it's from the Supreme Court in the state of Washington. The Supreme Court in the state of Washington sent this to all the members of their judiciary and legal community. This is a Supreme Court in Washington. This is what they said. We are compelled by recent events to join other state Supreme Courts around the nation in addressing our legal community. The devaluation and degradation of Black lives is not a recent event. It is a persistent and systemic injustice that predates this nation's founding. But recent events have brought to the forefront of our collective consciousness a painful fact that is, for too many of our citizens' common knowledge, the injustices faced by Black Americans are not relics of the past. We continue to see racialized policing and the overrepresentation of Black Americans in every stage of our criminal and juvenile justice system. Our institutions remain affected by the vestiges of slavery, Jim Crow laws that were never dismantled, and racial court decisions that were never disavowed. The legal community must recognize that we all bear responsibility for this ongoing injustice, and that we are capable of taking steps to address it if only we have the courage and the will. The injustices still plaguing our country has its root in the individual and collective actions of many, and it cannot be addressed without the individual and collective actions of us all. As we learn to do this hard and necessary work, may we also remember to support our Black colleagues by lifting their voices. Listening to and acknowledging their experiences will enrich and inform our shattered cause of dismantling systemic racism. We go by the title of justice, and we reaffirm our deepest level of commitment to achieving justice by ending racism. We urge you to join us in this effort. This is our moral imperative, sincerely signed by all the justices on the Washington Supreme Court. That's never, ever been done. And they sent it to the legal community all around the country. I'm simply saying something is happening. It's a little different. It's a little different, Council President. This ain't happened, which means that we have somehow struck a chord, that people now are recognizing that they have to do something. And the question is what they will do and how we must do it. Just the mere fact they put this letter out sends a signal to the folk on the bench that maybe I need to take a second look at what I'm doing. So I'm not discouraged, I'm encouraged.
Thank you for that, Reverend Anthony. And that was something that was worthy to be read. I'm gonna come back to you, Commissioner Griffie, and I know I still have Commissioner Brown on the line. Is there anything you want to add, Commissioner Brown, as we are about to wrap up? I think this is a conversation that we need to repeat again. Commissioner Brown, you are unmuted. Is there anything you wanted to add as we are closing?
Yes, I would just like to say, I echo the comments and the leadership of Reverend Anthony, and we do have a lot of work to do. We have a lot more training to do. We have made some progress, but with the relationship between the police department and the citizens, but we have a long way to go. And I think they just passed a bill or put one on the floor concerning some of the implicit bias issues concerning departments throughout the state. I have to just look at it and see, but I'm here. I'm willing and ready to work.
Okay, I appreciate you staying tuned in and the work that you do, Commissioner Brown. We look forward to talking to you again very soon. Thank you so very much. Commissioner Griffie, did you want to add some closing remarks?
Yes, thank you, Council President. I just want to encourage the community to not give up the fight, keep going, work with us. We want to ensure that their voice is heard. That's why we're here. Detroit, although it's not perfect, actually has a model oversight framework in place. Not a lot of cities have a commission, and I can tell you this commission is full of its minorities, Detroit residents who want to help, who are like me, raised in this city, lives in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and I know the people in this community, and I really want to represent them well. So if there are things or policies that are constructive that you want to see happen, reach out to us. We are here for you. And I think that that's why we're going to be one of the main things I want to accomplish in the next week is to be a leader in terms of adopting these policies. There are 8 key policies, and I want Detroit to be one of the first ones to say we've got all 8. that's easy to do because we've got a really strong oversight committee that's supportive. So work with us. We're here for you, and we love our city.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Griffie. Before I go to you for closing remarks, Reverend Anthony, let me just say again, thank you to everyone who have joined us today. And we will be honoring the city in order to honor George Floyd. The Downtown Detroit Partnership is leading the effort to light our city purple through June the 9th in tribute to his life. This symbolic lighting of our downtown area using the color purple symbolizes Detroit's hope for peace and justice in the memory of George Floyd. Also want to just announce that today I will be partnering with the City of Highland Park and Farmers to Families Food Box at 10:30 at 12100 Woodward Avenue, corner of California. In the parking lot, you can pick up a food box. And also at 1 p.m., I will be partnering with Temple of Praise Church at 26540 West McNichols. You can pick up a produce food box. That is at 1 p.m. at 10:30. They will have 25-pound boxes of fresh produce. Again, 24650 West McNichols at the corner of Salem between Telegraph and Beach Daily. The food will be distributed to you very safely into your car. Also, you can follow me on social media or visit my city website at www.detroitmi.gov/Brenda Jones to be added to my email distribution list. Reverend Anthony.
Thank you, Council President. I just have 11 words. Vote, vote, vote. Take your souls to the polls and vote.
That was 11 words, Reverend Anthony, and I'm going to add on to those 11 words that Reverend Anthony say. If you chose to not take your souls to the polls, please fill out your absentee application ballot. We know that we're dealing with COVID-19 right now, and many people will be voting or wish to vote, but really do not want to go to the polls. So you will be able to get the absentee ballot in the mail. So fill out your absentee application. I think they went out across the state of Michigan, so you should have received that application. If you did not receive one, please call your clerk's office to get that absentee application so that you still can vote, even if you do not want to go to the polls. I know polls in the city of Detroit will still be open. The clerk has said that she will open 2 polls in each district. There's also voting 30 days ahead of time at 7 locations: Election Commission, Wayne County Community College Northwest, Wayne County Community College Downtown, Wayne County Community College East, I believe, the clerk's office, Northwest Activity Center, and also I think it's Farwell Recreation Center that you will be able to vote 30 days in advance if you want to still go out and do the voting at one of the satellite locations. Again, the clerk in Detroit has indicated there will be at least 2 polls open in each district on election day. Please go out and vote, or please get your absentee ballot and vote. If you want to see a change, that's how you make a change, by voting. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We will be back at 12 noon as we honor our heroes. Those are the men and women who go out each day. They are our essential services. We honor them. We honor people from the community who are helping others in the community as they cannot get out. Please join us at 12 noon as we honor our essential workers, our community leaders this week. Until then, everyone have a wonderful and safe weekend. Don't forget, put that mask on your face if you must go out. Stay safe, keep your families safe, and keep those around you safe by wearing that mask. Also, don't forget to keep hand sanitizers close to you so that you can constantly keep those hands clean. It is said the average person put their hands in their face probably about 20 times an hour unknowingly. They're touching something on their face. Please stay safe until we meet again. And I know we're going to have this conversation again. We are over our hour. Until we meet again, God bless you. Thank you to our sign interpreter this morning, Ms. Hicks. You've done an awesome job. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you to Team Jones, who without you, I couldn't do what I do. I appreciate all of you. And again, thank you to my guests, Rev Wendell Anthony, Chief James Craig, Commissioner Yvette Griffie, and also he just joined us and I put him on the spot, Commissioner Brown. We appreciate you as well. God bless you. Thank you to all of the listeners that were listening. We were not able to answer all of the calls and hear from all of our people who raised their hands. I don't even know if we had anything on Facebook, but we will get you the next time. Until we meet again, we will stand adjourned. God bless you and thank you for sharing in this morning. Be safe.